All right, get ready because today we are going deep into some really interesting philosophy.
Yeah, it's a heady one for
Not
sure,
it is.
isn't
We're
it?
talking about critical realism,
Right.
but with a twist.
Yeah.
And the twist is, how does critical realism handle the way that we make meaning
Out of everything.
out of everything? Semiosis, signs and symbols language, even traffic lights,
Mm-hmm.
clothing choices.
Absolutely. All of those things that help us make sense of this world.
That's right. And that's something that critical realism, well, it's a bit of a problem for it.
It is.
And a lot of scholars have pointed that out, like Norman Fairclough.
Yeah.
He basically asks, can critical realism really account for the way that we humans make meaning?
And that's where our deep dive guides come in today.
That's right.
Luca Magni and Tobin Nelhaus.
Yes.
Each with their own kind of unique take on this problem.
Yeah, they both kind of tackle this problem of semiosis.
Right.
But before we jump into their very fascinating and at times mind-bending ideas, let's do a quick recap.
Yeah, let's do a level set.
What is critical realism? Think about it like a cake, all right?
Okay.
Different layers.
I like where this is going.
So the bottom layer is the real. This is like the recipe for the cake.
Okay.
It's those underlying structures and mechanisms that make things happen.
Right. The fundamental forces at play.
That's right.
Yeah.
Above that, you have the actual, which is like the cake batter being mixed,
Okay.
being baked according to the recipe, right?
Mhm.
It's those events and processes that are generated by that underlying structure, the real.
So the universe in motion, so to speak.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And then finally, you have the top layer, the empirical. This is the slice of cake that you get to taste.
I like it.
But it's important to remember that that's just a small part
Yeah.
of the whole cake.
Oh, the whole reality.
Right.
That's right.
So think about a traffic jam.
Okay.
Classic example.
Yeah.
The real might be like a poorly designed road system.
Right.
The actual is all the cars trying to navigate that system.
Right.
And the empirical is your experience being stuck, wondering if you'll ever get home.
And wondering why everybody else is on the road today.
Exactly. So that's where the semiosis problem comes in.
It's okay.
Because critical realism seems to handle the material world really well.
Yeah.
Cars, roads, laws of physics.
Right.
But what about the meaning that we layer on top of it?
That we bring to the table.
Exactly.
Right.
So that red octagon, it doesn't inherently mean stop.
No, it's just a shape.
It's just a shape.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we as a society have decided that that's what it signifies. And that shared understanding, that meaning that we've constructed,
Right.
that's what shapes our behavior.
Totally.
Even though it's on a whole different level than the physical sign itself.
Exactly. So it's like this layer of interpretation that gets added on
That's right.
to the material world.
Yeah, semiosis is at play. Every time we interpret a symbol, we use language or tell a story, right?
Absolutely. It's deeply embedded in our experience of the world.
There really is. And that's where Magni and Nelhaus step in.
Yeah.
They both offer kind of different ways to integrate semiosis into that critical realist picture.
Right. Because they're saying, hey, we can't just ignore this.
Exactly.
This is a fundamental part of reality.
Right.
And we have to figure out where it fits.
Yes. So Magni's approach, he calls it learnable enhanced Boscarian ontology. Thankfully, LEBO.
Yeah. Thank goodness for the acronym.
Right. It's a mouthful.
It is.
But the concept itself is pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So it's like adding a whole new layer to our reality cake.
Okay. Another layer.
Another layer.
Right.
He calls this the learnable layer.
Okay.
And it's all that mental stuff that shapes our understanding, right? So our biases,
Right.
our cultural assumption,
The way we were raised.
the way we learn, basically all the baggage we bring
Mhm.
when we're trying to understand the world.
Exactly.
But here's the key point. Magni doesn't see the learnable layer as separate from the other three. They're all constantly interacting
All right.
and influencing each other.
So it's not just a rigid hierarchy.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's more of a,
More of a dance.
like a fluid kind of dynamic relationship between these different levels.
Right. A constant feedback loop.
That's a great way to put it.
Right.
So think about scientific progress.
Okay.
The tools and the theories that we
Yeah.
develop,
Yeah.
that's part of the learnable,
Yeah.
right? Directly impacts what we can observe, the empirical.
Right.
And this then influences how we understand the universe, both on the actual and the real.
It's like our tools and our methods change what we see,
Exactly.
which then changes how we understand the world.
That's right. So it's a fascinating
Yeah.
feedback loop.
It is. And I think what's really intriguing about Magni's approach is that it really acknowledges
Yeah.
the power of human cognition
Yes.
and meaning making.
It's not just
it's not just a passive thing that we're doing.
No.
It's actually shaping our understanding.
That's right. So that's Magni now.
Yeah.
Milhouse.
He goes
in a different direction.
a little bit of a different direction.
I think it's safe to say
Yeah.
mind-blowing direction.
Yeah.
He suggests that maybe the empirical, what we observe, is always shaped by semiosis
Okay.
and not just human semiosis.
Whoa. Okay.
Right.
So even things that don't have, like human brains,
Yeah.
are engaging in this meaning making.
Right. And he brings in this really fascinating concept called biosemiotics,
Okay.
which looks at how meaning making happens throughout the natural world,
Interesting.
even in those organisms without complex brains
Right.
like us.
Right.
So take a flower, for example.
Okay.
Those bright colors didn't just evolve randomly.
Right.
That's a form of communication, right? Signaling to pollinators.
Okay.
That's meaning making.
Right.
That's essential for survival.
So even on a basic biological level,
Yes,
there's a form of semiosis happening.
that's right.
Fascinating.
So Nelhouse is saying semiosis isn't just a human thing.
It's fundamental.
It's fundamental to how all living systems interact and understand their environment,
Right.
which is a pretty radical idea.
It is, yeah. Kind of changes how you view the world.
It really does.
Yeah,
It makes you think about things a little differently.
it does.
So we've got these two pretty radical ideas on the table, right?
Yeah, we've got Magni and Milhouse.
How do they kind of stack up against each other?
Well, despite their very different approaches, I think both of them would agree
Yeah.
that semiosis is essential
Yes.
to understanding reality.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, they both challenge critical realism to say you can't just kind of brush this off as a side note.
Exactly.
Meaning making is woven into how the world works.
Yes.
But where they differ is their focus.
Yeah, explain that a little bit more.
Well, Magni is primarily concerned with the impact of human cognition
Okay.
on how we know things,
Right.
right? So it's that human-centric view, while Nelhouse kind of expands that idea of semiosis to the entire natural world.
Okay, so much broader.
Much broader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So which approach is more compelling?
That's a tough one, but from what I gather,
Yeah.
it seems like the source material leans towards Magni's Libo.
Okay.
And I think there are a few good reasons for that.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, Libo feels more
Yeah.
logically complete
Okay.
and coherent
Hmm.
as a framework.
Okay.
It ties in nicely with what we know about human psychology and learning, and it gives us this really powerful tool to analyze how cultures
Yes.
develop and evolve over time.
That's really interesting.
Right, based on how they learn and create shared meanings.
I like that.
Right. So think about how different societies interpret concepts like family or success.
Okay. Yeah.
These variations can be traced back to their unique learnable layers.
That's a really good point.
Right.
So their own kind of unique spin on how they interpret and experience the world.
Exactly. And while Nelhouse's idea is super thought-provoking,
It is.
it doesn't offer the same level of
Yeah.
detail or practical application.
Okay.
You know? It's kind of like
Yeah.
just a really interesting idea.
It's like a seed
Yeah, it's like a seed.
that hasn't quite blossomed yet.
Yeah. It's
So what does all this mean for us?
Well, I think the key takeaway
Yeah.
is that semiosis isn't just some interesting side note.
Yeah.
It's a core part of
Right.
how reality operates.
Yes.
And it's impacting everything from the way we do science
Yes.
to how we experience something as mundane as a traffic jam.
Absolutely. We can't escape it.
We can't escape it.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. And I think bringing semiosis into the fold
Yes.
makes critical realism a lot more powerful and nuanced
Yes.
in its ability to explain the world around us.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that brings us to the end of part 1 of our deep dive.
Right.
We've laid the groundwork and explored 2 very different perspectives on semiosis and critical realism.
Absolutely.
But in part 2, we're going to delve deeper into the implications of Magni's Libo
Yes.
and how it can help us understand the complexities of this crazy world we live in.
You're going to get practical.
So stay tuned.
Yeah.